let's move on to we can't talk about Barbie and not talk about the other half of Barbenheimer, which of course is Oppenheimer. This film, if you guys have seen my review out there, it's up on the channel now. I love this movie. I can't say enough amazing things about this. I could talk about it for hours. I just saw it recently for a second time, and it got way better after a second viewing. I caught a lot of things.
I did as well. I saw it twice, and it was fantastic.
It's great. And that movie is also having enormous success as it is now in the top 10 R-rated films of all time, coming in right now at the worldwide total box office of 650, almost 7, or not almost 700, almost 651 million. Um, it, it's just crushing records right and left. Nobody, I don't think, thought that a 3-hour historical drama would be getting this much success at the box office, but it is doing surprisingly well. And I can even see it getting close to $700 million once its box office run is over. I mean, now, of course, CJ, I think you will agree with me on this. Barbenheimer is obviously a huge reason why this film is as successful as it is money-wise. But did you expect this film to have this much legs in repeat viewings? Because I think a huge total of this is repeat viewings. So honestly, what do you have to say about a 3-hour historical drama, not only getting $650 million, but cracking into the top 10 R-rated films of all time? I mean, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think every time Nolan manages to surprise us in some way, I think this one was particularly surprising because his last two films, Tenet and Dunkirk, weren't necessarily the massive sort of cultural hits that his other films has made, The Dark Knight, Inception, these other ones. This film is unique in that it's a 3-hour historical biopic about a nuclear physicist. Which on paper sounds like that's really boring. But as soon as you watch it, it goes and it's captivating and it's super compelling in the way he shoots it and the way that the story is told, both from the perspective of Robert Downey Jr.'s character and Oppenheimer himself in film. The way he's making it all come together. It makes for a fantastic rewatch, because I remember the first time I watched it, I said, "Oh man, I think if I go back to see that again, I'll see some more things." Yes. And I went to go back to rewatch it, and I definitely saw some more of what I definitely saw more of what I thought I'd see, and then some. I was like, man, if I go see it again, I would see more. It just every time it just becomes more and more impactful, I think. And I think most of Nolan's films do that, actually. I remember I saw Tenet twice. I saw Dunkirk a couple of times. Dark Knight, of course, I've seen a whole bunch of times. And it's every time you see a Nolan film, it just keeps getting almost better and better. And so I'm still very surprised, though, that it's made this much money. And that it's just doing absolutely gangbusters. I think I think what it is people are really craving, and this goes for both Barbie and Oppenheimer. They're craving for good original films, good new films that are well made, they're well told, they're well written, they have good characters, which has kind of been a knock on a couple of Nolan's two previous films. Both of those films, they did not have really strong characters that you could latch onto. I mean, Oppenheimer, you rode with him the whole way. His wife, you rode with him sort of the whole way. You were with these characters kind of the whole time, and you really bought into them. And Barbie kind of the same way. You're kind of with these characters, and so people are just craving good original stories. And I think both of these films, when they came out, obviously, Oppenheimer is not necessarily like a franchise starter, but it's still an amazing one-off film that people are dying to see. And so I think the audience is just craving these kind of well-produced, well-written, well-filmed things, and that have larger meanings and are kind of more complex and get people talking and people active online and in person. It's really a cool statement about movies, I think, and it's really a cool time and place for both of these movies to come out and doing so well as they are. I think it says a lot about what the strength of good stories can be.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the thing about characters. I will say, like you said, it's a big knock usually on Nolan, especially the female characters.
Mhm,
And I do wish we got more time with them. Even Emily Blunt's character. That's why I feel like she may not get an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress,
mhm,
um, because I don't think she was in the film enough to have that kind of pull. Granted, she has a great third act scene and a great third act moment. If you've
mhm,
seen the film, you know what that is.
mhm,
Um, but and I get that it's Oppenheimer's story, but I do wish we kind of got more ground with Emily Blunt's character as Kitty Oppenheimer.
mhm,
Florence Pugh was great in her little section she got. After
mhm,
seeing it a second time, I do understand maybe why she wasn't in it as much as people thought she should be. I kind of get
mhm,
why Nolan took that route with her.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, like you said, great original content is what people are wanting. A lot of people always complain that we're not getting original content anymore, and all we're getting is sequels.
mhm,
Well, unfortunately, y'all are dead wrong because there's a lot more original content being made today than there have ever has been.
mhm,
But it's not pushed
mhm,
because usually it's a lot of Netflix original movies or
mhm,
streaming movies,
mhm,
which aren't A, well marketed, but
mhm.
B, usually aren't that good.
Right.
That's why the average moviegoer doesn't really understand that there's more original content today than there ever has been.
Mhm,
But this is great. These two films are great original content that have been to the wide screen and have delivered just phenomenal performances all around from critics, audiences, and box office. Which not only do maybe the people who made them they need that success, but the movie theaters more importantly need that success. And these films are two great films, and really the only two this whole summer season that have done well. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse did pretty well, and I
mhm,
guess so did Guardians. But really, only it was looking up to be a great summer,
mhm.
but there really wasn't any standouts besides those four that I named. And
Right,
so
exactly. And there's been a lot of films that have come out that have been just very underwhelming,
yes,
either
it's
commercially
true.
or they haven't met people's expectations. I think Guardians was actually one of those. I think Guardians didn't quite meet people's expectations.
Interesting. I
It still made good money. But I think there was a lot of I think there was a lot on the table that they could have gone with that movie, but then also other movies like the I'm forgetting the name, the D&D movie, the Dungeons and Dragons
yes,
film that came out did not do very well at all, even
but
though
it
it was
was a huge surprise. Critics
yeah,
and audiences really did like that. It's one of
yes,
my favorite films in the year.
that's mine as well. I actually just saw it a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, this is a great film.
Yes.
Again, it did not do fantastically commercially. It did very badly. Mission Impossible that just came out. I mean, it came out and people loved it. Critics and audiences loved it, and it just got absolutely annihilated at the box office because the week after Barbie and Oppenheimer came out, and everyone just totally forgot about it. I mean,
Even
Tom Cruise was literally the savior of the box office last year, the savior of movies, the savior of Hollywood last year. And
yeah,
here he is in the is it the seventh Mission Impossible film,
yes,
and a huge popular franchise. I mean, basically everybody likes those movies,
huh?
and
They're
nothing
great.
vanished.
It
And
and I
so
think that's because that first opening weekend for it only hit $55 million, I believe. And
yeah,
people say the Oppenheimer and Barbie excuse, but I'm like, I don't agree with that because not enough people went out to see it the first weekend that it came out. And it had a
mhm,
weird release strategy where I think it released on like Monday had early screenings, Tuesday had early screenings, and then
mhm,
Wednesday was a wide release. But
mhm.
if you really wanted to see that film, you would have gone out to see it right away. And I don't think anybody really has an answer to why it failed
Yeah.
because it is a yes, it's at 500 some $1 million right now. So,
Mhm.
but with marketing plus the budget of I think it was like 300 some $1 million, I don't even think it's at the break even point.
Yeah.
You know, it might lose money or it might just break even or it might just make a little bit of profit. But
Mhm,
that's a
mhm.
movie that Paramount expected at
Yeah.
least I would say $700 million for. And
Oh,
like
at
you said,
least.
it's one of the biggest surprises of the year for considering a flop, but it's a great movie of critics from critics and
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah, so many of these films have gotten, and I think this is a critical error on the part of producers in Hollywood and executives and things, is their movies are just too expensive. They're just too
Budgets are,
expensive.
yeah,
These
they're
movies,
crazy.
these budgets are insane, and I don't know if that has to do with kind of the larger economic reasons that things are more expensive, people are harder to hire,
Yeah,
craftsmen are harder to get a hold of, like basic thing, visual effects artists. I mean, all these things. I don't know if they're more expensive. They're probably not actually. They're probably just
no,
dumping all this money into these projects when you could scale it down and say, okay, instead of a $200 million movie, let's make a hundred
yeah,
million dollar movie, and let's scale back the marketing a little bit, but we're going to make our money back. I mean,
right.
A24, I think, is a studio
They
that
do
does
great.
great return on investment. I mean, their films are
Fantastic.
small. They're
Yep.
typically horror, I think.
Hmm.
And horror movies are really easy to make cheaply. Westerns are another one.
Yes.
These ones are made to be, just print money basically, because you
Mhm.
do kind of all you do a lot of your work on the back end in terms of like editing and sound and scary effects with lights and things
Right.
like that.
Yep.
And then you're able to make this return on investment. But these movies, these huge movies, they're taking big swings and they think they can throw as much money as they want because it's a franchise movie, because we got big actors, because we got a good
Mhm.
director. It's like, man, you need to take those chances way, way less often. You need to
Yeah.
throw massive money at these projects way less often, scale it back, and be good stewards of your resources.
I mean, I agree. We're getting off topic, but I will say quickly before we move on.
Mhm,
Indiana Jones was $300 million. Same
mhm,
with Mission Impossible. I look at Indiana Jones. I watched that film. It's okay.
mhm,
I don't get where the money went. Now, I do think that one of the problems is these films were made during COVID, and I think COVID did jack up the budget quite a bit.
mhm,
Now, granted, I think for Mission Impossible, you heard some of the stories. Tom Cruise renting out like a cruise ship for the cast and crew to be on. Now,
mhm,
maybe that didn't come on the studio. Maybe Tom Cruise did that out of his own pocket. But
mhm,
I do think COVID did jack up the budget quite a bit on a lot of films, and for people I
mhm,
know in Hollywood, it did take a hit financially.
mhm,
Um, so maybe that could be it, but there is no way that Indiana Jones should have cost $300 million. That should never have gotten approved. I don't know why that was approved by Disney whatsoever.
no.
But like you said, Hollywood needs to take a look at budgets, scale
Mhm,
it back. Indiana Jones could have been like a $170 million movie,
mhm,
budget-wise,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
and I
it would
agree.
have been successful even instead of flopping. But
100%. And I think,
yeah.
and this is kind of different, a slightly different topic because it's in the world of streaming. But I watched, a show like Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones, a show like Rings of Power.
Oh,
Supposedly they spent $1 billion on that. They spent
that's
something
true.
like six.
That is true.
They spent something like $60 million per episode in like an 8 episode show or something like that. I have no clue where that money went. Not
You
a
look at
clue.
it and you're like, in the don't get me started on that because I was hugely disappointed by the series.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, you look at it, you look at a lot of these films, you don't know where it went, you don't know why it is. Hollywood just needs to, they need to reel in it. They really do. They need to reel in the budgets, and hopefully
Mhm.
they do, because a lot of these films this year have not been making a lot of money. So,
Right. Right.
all right.